All right. So he is one of the heroes, so to speak, of well, he was born in 1752, but he still was active for about 30 years in the 19th century. Uh, so he was one of the. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. There is a background noise. Thank you. So John Nash, you see, he was born on the 18th of January, and on that day, I didn't make the presentation on him, so we are 3 days later. Was one of the foremost British architects of the Regency and Georgian eras, during which he was responsible for the design in the neoclassical and picturesque styles of many important areas of London. His designs were financed by the Prince Regent and by the era's most successful property developer, James Barton, with whose son, Decimus Barton, he collaborated extensively. Now, you perhaps noticed this. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. This very interesting dichotomy almost, the neoclassical and the picturesque. And they are really opposite. But I think this duality existed in John Nash. Nash's best known solo designs are the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, a very eccentric work, the Marble Arch and Buckingham Palace. Well, at Buckingham Palace, he only did some parts. His best known collaboration with James Barton is Regent Street, and his best known collaborations with Decimus Barton are Regent's Park and its terraces and Carlton House Terrace. He built a lot in London, truly. I mean, it's as if it was his city. The majority of his buildings, including those to the design of which the Bartons did not contribute, were built by the company of James Barton. Okay, so this is a statue of the man, truly a very, very successful and influential architect in Great Britain at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th. But they had quite a number of brilliant architects at that time, Great Britain, and over the year we'll have the occasion to talk about them. Some drawings by John Nash. The drawings maybe. I mean, I don't know if he had collaborators. I don't know if he did them, himself or someone in his office. He was very involved with the political structure of his time, and that's why he received many commissions. Now look at this work, and it was built in Brighton, and we are going to look at it in more detail. A very eccentric work, exotic, probably influenced by India. We begin with Park Crescent in London from 1806. He was already, almost, 53 years old. And what it is here, you see works that are, he built a lot of housing complexes, kind of similar. I don't know if they were addressed. I imagine they were the destination of these buildings was not a very poor segment of London society at that time. But these buildings that he built in London are significant contributions to the city. And personally, I'm not so thrilled by this kind of architecture, but I cannot deny its quality, and it is a crystallization of strongly held, I would say, beliefs, architectonic beliefs. But as it was mentioned at the beginning, it is also interesting his other side, the picturesque side, the neoclassical one we see here. This is a canal. Apparently, he also, I mean, he designed also, he also did landscape designs of a certain amplitude. I like British landscape. Is romantic. Is not rigid. Strangely, the French, who are Latins, are much more rigid and geometrical in their landscape design than the Britons. The Haymarket Theatre from 1820, he lived for other, I don't know, less than 15 years, is an urban theatre. It still functions. Now, his own house on Regent Street from 1820, 1821, quite a large house, as you can see. Obviously, he was not nobody in the Londonese society. And York Gate from 1821. Well, it's not really very explicit, this York Gate. But wait a second, I'm a little bit confused because this was supposed to be the John Nash. I'm a little bit, I'm sorry, strange. Just a second, please. No, it's this one. As I said, I have two presentations on John Nash, and at the beginning they look a little bit similar, but there are some dissimilarities. I hope I will be able to show you the other one as well. So we are contemplating his own house. Then York Gate. The gate is not so visible here, but the church behind. The Church of All Souls, also in London. I have more pictures of it here. Is the building that is clearly a church. Unfortunately, he was the target of a cartoon. For some reason, someone made fun of him because of this church, just as, for example, in Vienna, people made fun of that central building designed by Adolf Loos. You see here, you know, the cartoon, obviously trying to irritate John Nash with it. I wonder why that spire provoked such a aggressive humor. The building, it's 200 years old, a little bit more than 200, and it's true. The spire is is very pointed. It is obvious, but the building has some qualities in its so-called neoclassical way. And here, because of the spire, you almost feel some kind of a combination between the neoclassicism and an abstracted, simplified Gothicism in a way. The interior there is nothing Gothic here, but nor does it look like a church. But that this is just the entrance into the church, which looks more like a church. The building behind the nave is almost like a gathering place of some sort. Hanover Terrace. He built a lot of these so-called terraces. They're actually housing complexes and rather similar to one another. They are communal. Is communal living. They are kind of horizontal blocks of flats. You could also say that there are some kind of row houses put together into a row of buildings, but you don't see the individual buildings that compose it. It's a formula that I guess it worked for London at that time, and maybe it still does. Otherwise, the architecture is, kind of conventional. What you see here, and what can we say? It's an official, so to speak, form of aesthetics. I am sure it was popular, but for my taste, it's not sufficiently creative. But he was a skillful architect, not very innovative, I would say. Here, though, the Royal Moose, here is an interesting architecture that is destined to not to human beings, but to animals. But of course, for the king's animals, and it's a fine, almost it's a dignified structure that I'm sure the king's horses loved and appreciated. Anyway, it does help to have a client like a king, of course, because then you can do luxurious, places even for animals. Anyway, the Sussex place from 1822, 1823, also housing complex with the allure of something else almost. They're good. They are, palaces for the people, but not for any kind of people. Maybe Riccardo Bofill inspired himself from some of these for his extravagant interventions in Paris. Yeah. So if you had an apartment here, you would feel like an aristocrat, a nobleman. But where although I imagine some of the people who live here were doing well. Albany Terrace, again, another so-called terrace. I don't know why they are called terraces. For me, the word terrace means something else. Sorry, I don't have pictures for that, but we'll arrive at other terraces. Park Square in London, 1823, 1824, the same kind of, dense housing complex with an architectonic palette that is rather predictable and historicist. But this was the 19th century. They didn't really invent so much, although the architecture plainly inspired by the Gothic, in my opinion, was more interesting than this one, the neoclassical side of the Breton spirit at that time. Well, I would say that the Victorian spirit probably manifested itself more in the second half of the 19th century. Both architects, him and Soane, died in 1830 something. But John Soane, I think in a neoclassical vein, he's more creative and more powerful than John Nash. We'll arrive at him. It might be that with John Soane also it helped him, his humble upbringing. He was born in modest circumstances, and that gave him some vitality to his architecture. John Nash is a correct architect, if we can say so. Although he has his extravagances too, and we'll arrive at some of them. Park Village, East and West. Here we also see a little bit of extravaganza. That roof part on the right side of the building, which cannot be seen unfortunately in the pictures. But there are two, so maybe I don't have the picture of that particular building. There is East and West. Cambridge Terrace, again, 1824, the same kind of housing complex that we already saw a few by now. What can we say? I guess it works, it's fine. It's a decent, correct architecture. It's probably very comfortable to live in. But here we see a touch of Claude Nicolas Ledoux, those columns here, on the left. These are, obviously, but who knows? Maybe he was not inspired by Ledoux. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. It's possible. Okay. Ulster Terrace, another terrace from 1824, the same kind of whitish, neoclassicism. I don't know what to say about this. This is not truly my preference, but who cares if it is or it isn't. Fortunately, London has many other kinds of architecture. Buckingham Palace, the staterooms and western front, since much extended by these people, James Pennethorne, Edward Bloor, and Aston Webb, will see this is the western facade with a royal family, quite a large family and colorful family. It's not bad to be an aristocrat or a royalty, obviously. And the ladies enjoy the large, sophisticated hats. We can see the Queen in the center. So this was the part of the Buckingham Palace that John Nash did, the western facade, but he also did some other things. So it wasn't very clear to me which ones. The Clarence House, 1825, 1827. So he was active until his, until his death, as many architects are actually. It's a privileged profession in a way. When many people get retired at 60 something, architects go on and on almost forever. Alvaro Siza is still building a 93, 94, Doshi the same, Eisenman at 88, he's still teaching at Yale. Kenneth Frampton is still active at 90 and not building, but writing. So I think architects are privileged by nature, perhaps, or I don't know, by the specificities of their profession. So this is, a fragment of a plan for the house that I just mentioned. This is the house, the building. It is the same kind of building. Now you can recognize a John Nash building very easily, actually. It's not very original, it's not turbulent, it's not, it's a building that is officially righteous, so to speak. A Cumberland Terrace, another so-called terrace, but this one more emphatic. You almost think this is the l'Assemblée Nationale in Paris. It's not. It's a housing complex, if you can believe it. What exactly is happening there, in the center? I don't know. If they are apartments, I hope not. I hope there are public spaces of some sort. And anyway, architecture sometimes lies in the need for representation. It evokes more than it should. You could say to an extent is, a little bit impressive, if I can, if I can use such a kind of funny way of expressing myself, a little bit impressive. But it is, an architecture that values representation and succeeds to an extent, maybe too much. Again, I don't know exactly what is happening behind those windows. But the columns are at an urban scale, and they evoke some kind of institutional character. Former United Services Club, Pall Mall, now it is the Institute of Directors. I don't know what kind of directors, I imagine film directors or theater directors, I don't know, 1826, 1828. You'll see a nice logo of this place has. You see it here, the Institute of Directors. And the alami, please ignore the alami that comes from the photographer and the company that is so insistently not renouncing to placing alami all over their pictures, and they ruin their pictures. Look at these columns; they are they are the real thing, so to speak. I mean, the real thing in the 19th century, because in old Greece they were different, of course. Yeah, the directors have comfortable ambience in this building. And what can we say? It's London, an opulent society. It was an empire at one time, and it shows. Gloucester Terrace, 1827. Here you can see more obviously the row houses, but they are still brought together in a convincing way. So there is unity, although it is composed, this unity, of various almost identical fragments. The Marble Arch. This is an arch from 1828 and is considered one of his best works. It's a triumphal arch, as we have seen in many countries, and not just in Paris. It's a commemorative structure, perhaps. The Romans used it, and I don't know. I mean, it commemorates probably an event. I don't know what event. The building is fine, I guess, but it's not very creative. I would have liked to see some non-conformism here, but then John Nash only, although he was capable of creating surprises, and we'll arrive at some of them. A building from 1830. He truly, London was his canvas, so to speak, and he was the painter. The Royal Pavilion at Brighton. Now, this is the bright exception, so to speak, the extravagant Royal Pavilion. You saw already the sketch, the drawing, and that's how it was built. And look at this, you wouldn't believe it is in Europe. It is in England. Well, England is not now part of Europe, but still is, even if officially it is not. You wouldn't expect anywhere really around here to see such a building. And this only shows that, the influence of Great Britain and other countries which had colonies on the colonies was great. But sometimes also the colonized influenced the colonists. So here there is an influence of Southeast Asia on Great Britain's architecture. And so it works both ways. The colonist influences the colonized, and the colonized also influences the colonist. I don't know, it only shows again that we all have dual natures. I mean, we saw the terraces by John Nash, and now we see this kind of building. And you wonder, this is certainly not neoclassicism. And it seems exotism or exotic tendencies exist in all of us. And in a way, the more we repress them, the more they burst out when the occasion arrives. It's not a bad building. I actually like it more than his countless terraces and so on. At least then, here we
are those turrets chimneys or something? Those turrets that we see, are they chimneys or something? These ones?
I doubt it. I don't know what they are. They are not minarets either. I don't know what they are. They are just, I don't know.
Actually, in traditional Islamic architecture, they don't put minarets this way. Like it's only on one wall and there are just two or four minarets, but he's placed, I think, four in each building, something like that.
No, I mean, they add something to the buildings, but I don't know their function, if there is a function at all. I don't know. They are strange. But being the palace of a king, he was able to do whatever crossed his imagination. And but there is all this embroidered architecture that is very finely executed because this was a pavilion for the king. And but it is very, very striking compared to what we saw before that he built in London.
Yeah,
And
that's
very an Islamic influence, it's obvious.
these look like as if influence from Alhambra, Spain. I think,
Yes,
yeah, the palace at Alhambra. I don't know.
yeah. Um, so John Nash was a cultured man who indulged in all kinds of architectures. And he was not the only one. The 19th century was an eclectic century. There were all kinds of influences. The most powerful, in my opinion, the most convincing was the neo-Gothic one. And I will talk about it tomorrow when it will be the day when Queen Victoria died. So it will be an occasion to talk about Victorian architecture, which often is actually very interesting. And without any interference from neoclassicism, it's a different spirit. That neo-Gothicism that Pugin, in a way, initiated, that mad architect who died at 40, after he built around 40 churches, a very interesting architect, extremely exuberant. He brought, he generated, he gave birth to neo-Gothicism in Great Britain, and then there were other architects who followed on his footsteps. A very interesting architecture. But John Nash is, now we look at an exotic work by him, but we saw before works that are rather conventional and to my taste a little bit boring. This is the last image of this presentation with those non-chimneys, whatever they are. But it shows again that architecture sometimes, even when it employs architectural elements that are not legitimate because of a specific function, their function might be of an aesthetical order, or even then, even when they are capricious, they are not totally without a raison d'etre. And there are such things also in nature and in the human body. There are certain things that I don't know. I mean, maybe the physiologists could explain to us what the function of certain things is, but there is also capriciousness, I would say. Anyway, let me go now to, I mean, I have another presentation with John Nash, and maybe now is the time to show it, since we are at John Nash now. Here I have other works shown, especially what he built outside of London. And they are different buildings, very different buildings from what he built in London. So again, deja vu, 1750 to 1835. John Nash, I will go kind of quickly now because the beginning is somehow similar to what I already showed. Here I show more works, and I also show works that were built outside of London. We saw the Royal Pavilion at Brighton. We just saw it. Then the Buckingham Palace, the East Front, we didn't see, but apparently he designed it too. But there were other interventions in time. So anyway, we see now his own tomb in St. James Churchyard. It's not, I don't know. I don't know if he designed it, but it's so I don't know, almost, I don't know. It doesn't have a lot of grace. Is primal, yes, maybe, but I don't know. Anyway, architectural model for the marble arch that we saw, which was designed by him, and it's in the Victoria Albert's Museum in London. This is just the model. We saw the real thing. Now this church that we saw here, I only show one picture of many works by him. We saw this one. We also saw, well, in this case, there are three pictures, I think. Um, Four. My God, my God. Is it a church? I don't know. I have a different understanding of how a church should look like, but then who cares about what I think? St. Mary's. This is another church that I don't know if it still exists. That was built by him. The Rotunda, Woolwich. This is here. We see his exotic leanings a little bit. The Cumberland Terrace, we saw it. So yes, with a certain amount of envy that I don't live there. The Carlton House Terrace. So he filled London with these things. The Theatre Royal Haymarket we saw, not with this picture, but we saw. Buckingham Palace garden front. This one we didn't see. There's still this huge palace. The Royal Mews we saw, and the Park Crescent, I guess we saw. Anyway, West Side Park Square. They all look like palaces, but these palaces are made up of apartments. And, you know, it was a fashion then, I imagine. We saw the Marble Arch. Chester Terrace. I go a little bit quicker because we still have to see other things, including John Soane and maybe even Philibert Delorme. Clarence House we saw. Your Gate here is wrongly identified. The Your Gate is not there. The Ulster's Terrace, another housing complex by John Nash in London. This one we saw. Where is the Institute of Directors? The plan for Regent Street, well, whatever we can see here. So he was also an urbanist. He had a lot of commissions because he was appreciated by those in power, and he had friends there. So you can imagine he was flooded with works. The conservatory, the Kew Gardens, this is an interesting building actually. It is neoclassical, but because of the large glass surfaces, has a certain flavor of some kind of a modernity. It reminds me a little bit of what Ricardo Bofill did later in his career, including in Barcelona. He built a theater somehow with this feeling. The Hanover Terrace, we have seen the Sussex Palace Place. We saw it, but not in this with this picture. This one kind of we saw. This is still largely as planned by Nash, a park, quite a vast park. I really like the green works in Great Britain. They are picturesque, romantic. St. James Park with Nash, the lake of John Nash. I don't know why it is called like this, perhaps because he designed it. The Gothic dining room, now it was destroyed, but look at this. So he was not exotic just in the King's Pavilion at Brighton, but in other works as well. You know, so he was neoclassical, all right, but when he had the chance to vent his fantasy, he did so. York Terrace, another neoclassical work. The sculptures there, if we can call them so, are certainly not his, kind of burlesque. Albany Terrace we saw. Cornwall Terrace we saw. Truly, he covered London with this. The Blaise Hamlet. This is the other side of him. the so-called romantic one, the Gothic one in a way, the picturesque one. And I sympathize with this, and maybe also because it's a little bit ruined, or the nostalgic man in me responds positively after all that whiteness with all his terraces in London. I welcome this kind of architecture. And he built several buildings in this way. Again, isn't it interesting that the same architect who built those neoclassical whitish buildings returned to this, almost vernacular rural architecture that is anything but neoclassical. This is an interest to a park. What can we say? Kronhill, he built in many styles. If we are to use these words, I don't think he's very convincing. All these changes in so-called style. I think a great architect somehow is beyond the limitations of a style. In other words, I mean, I could contradict myself. It appears so, but I think I remember if Ginny Gang, for example, from Chicago said, "I don't work within a style," but this doesn't mean she works with many styles. No, she is beyond style, while John Nash is not. He is truly working on the path of certain styles. This one we saw. Although I don't know exactly what kind of style this would be. But look at this banqueting room. My God, who said that life is difficult or without joys and pleasure? No, not for John Nash and not for his affluent society. The kitchen, even the kitchen is, I mean, look at it, it would have been a joy to be a cook in such a kitchen. It has the height of a museum and all those artificial trees. And now, this is for a different kind of world. Groveland's Park, a villa. What can we say? A villa. Wheatley Court. A court is indeed kind of ruined. I see that you can see through the walls there, or I don't know what's happening. Maybe it's just a stage design in a certain way, or deserted, quite large, of course. Newport, what is this? A church, a city hall? I don't know, probably a city hall. Sandridge Park, the man built a lot, really. He earned his life through architecture every single day and hour and minute and second. Longner Hall. Now look, this is something different. No, this is not neoclassical at all. This is Gothicist. And this goes well in Great Britain for some reason. A castle, he built even a castle. I mean, ignore those many cars on the right. They belong to the present, but the castle belongs to the 19th century. Remains of another castle. I like remains in general because I am a compassionate man, but these are not so romantic, really. Chalfont Park. I imagine he built also the castle there or whatever it is, not just the park. Another castle. This man really, England was his canvas and he was the painter. If I am to repeat myself, Sandridge Park, another park, certainly not for proletarians, nor the building, Sandridge Park, Devon, another large park and villa there, a church, another church, a rural church. I like rural churches, more modest, using stone, but it's not a very graceful architecture. Let's tell the truth. A druid house, even a druid temple. That's we don't see the temple though, but it was probably destroyed. But the druids still meet at Stonehenge at the equinoxes. Cleatha Castle, another castle. a very different architecture from the neoclassicism. We saw the Folly house. What can we say? Sometimes I have a feeling John Nash was not totally, extremely. No, I shouldn't say this. I better abstain. The rear facade of this house. Um, what can we say? I'm beginning to be tired of John Nash, to be honest with you. And I was a little bit tired, although it turned out that I made two presentations on him, but both not very convincing, and I'm not very proud of them or myself. Hermon Hill House. Now, this one, though, my God, this building is as if it is the 20th century. Looks like a modern building to my taste, or it was refurbished, or I don't know. Later, not by Nash. This is another huge house. England was doing well. Another castle, uh, and these are not medieval castles. These are castles from the 19th century. A cottage, a Swiss cottage. And look at this. I mean, this is not neoclassicism. It's not. But the man, we already know, he was a man of many hats, and he is an eclectic architect. He was an eclectic architect. Another castle. Now, this is a castle indeed. If ever was a clear cut castle, this is it. I don't know. Another. I'm tired of John Nash. Forgive me. I had enough of him. Thank you.